So, guys, let's have a look at this peak season. Just throw some things out there for you. We've got China's economy, it's malfunctioning, I would say. Demand from Europe bedeviled by a combination of inflation, economic stagnation, and we seemingly have these endless excess inventories. On top of that, we've had a container shipping peak season that sort of disappeared without anyone really noticing. So what's been going on? Because we've had these signs of a firming air cargo market in the shape of a 4 to 5% increase in rates and demand at the end of September. Niall, you've been rather bearish about an air cargo peak season through most of 2023. Were you wrong? Have we all misread the macroeconomic tea leaves, or is this just about factory closures in China for Golden Week in the first week of October? And shippers will soon be enjoying lower prices once again very soon.
God, that's quite a few balls you're throwing at me, like with all these macro events. Whether I'm right or wrong, I think is irrelevant because we all have our opinion, some more based on stats than others. But we've been quite bearish this year on our expectations of demand growth. And to be frank, we still are in that sense. And I think there's more talk about, might there be a peak? Will there be a peak? Do we see signals of an early peak? Then it's actually being materialized in volumes. So what we expected and what we are seeing now is more typical seasonality in air freight. Because if you're comparing September to August, and no wonder, I would say, in most years, would you expect an uptick in rates? You'll see a bit of the airlines will go into their passenger shoulder, as they call it, schedule. So less flights than in the peak of the summer, which will pull capacity a bit out of the market. And there typically seems to be a bit more demand in September. So those two combined, I think, is normal behavior I think we had a transition from the crazy 2 years. Then we saw the sharp downfall in rates. We believe there's now more of a floor, and it's quite normal to expect higher rates in September and August. Yes, we also noticed increase, for example, out of Vietnam, Southeast Asia into the United States. In a couple of weeks, we saw rates go up by 40%. And then there were signals, whoa, is this an indication of a peak? Let me put a little bit into perspective. That 40% increase in rates brought the current level more or less at par with what it was pre-COVID. So it was well below pre-COVID a few weeks ago. And secondly, we believe that it's been an accumulation of local events, Golden Week, an Apple product launch, which resulted in that. But I would say it's the exception to the rule.
And will it carry on through October and November then? This is when we would traditionally talk about peak season pre-COVID.
I think it's unlikely.
Eric, you're out there talking to people in the business all the time. Where would you say sentiment is, for example, in the US right now about the rest of this quarter?
Yeah, I would say that most logistics folks finally realize there won't be much of a peak season. And forwarders say so far there hasn't been much of a bump in shipping activity from their customers. It's too early to celebrate the recent uptick in volumes and rates. I suspect some of the gains are due to the shipping ahead of Golden Week in China to get ahead of factory closures. Some of the strong activity out of China is South China focused and tied to e-commerce demand. And you also have the new iPhone release. So there's some optimism out there, but the rest of the world is quite muted. Chartering full freighters is more case by case for specific customer need these days. One airline executive I ran into last week said he was worried that the market is still flat, considering that last year at this time, the market was in a substantial decline. So against easy comparisons, the market isn't improving much.